Hi everybody, welcome to English 101 with David Hancock. I am David Hancock, and welcome to the punctuated series where we're going to talk in depth about different pieces of punctuation and how to use them. The importance of punctuation is that it takes this nebulous blob of thought in your brain and it helps you structure your sentences so that somebody reading them can understand what you're saying as you want them to understand it, so that they can think in the same way that you're thinking, understand in the same way you're understanding. That's the whole point of grammar. That's the whole point of punctuation. So this series is going to go in depth on most every piece of punctuation and discuss how to use them. But before we do that, we need to talk about punctuation hierarchies. The first part of this is sentence hierarchies. Now, what do I mean by a hierarchy? A hierarchy is simply an order. General, colonel, lieutenant, I think. I know if I'm wrong on that, someone's going to correct me. Or any other sort of thing. President, vice president, everybody like that. So the hierarchy is a structure of authority, or in grammar, precedence. Precedence meaning what comes first, okay? So in grammar, much like a general commands everyone and a private commands no one, there are pieces of punctuation that control sentences in different ways, and some that dictate the use of all punctuation, and some that are dictated by all other punctuation. Here's a way to visualize a sentence hierarchy. And what we can see here is word. Word is used the most frequently in writing. Technically, you could say letters, but letters don't actually carry any grammatical structure in and of themselves. Words are the smallest grammatical unit. Letters are just the building blocks of words. So words in grammar are the most used part of writing. After words come phrases. Phrases are groups of words that have a meaning, but not a grammatical context, or they're a grammatical structure, but they can't be a clause or a sentence on their own. So a phrase is a group of words. Next, we have dependent clauses. Dependent clauses could be thought of as partial sentences. They're a little bit bigger than phrases, but they aren't able to stand on their own as a sentence. After that, we have independent clauses, which, if punctuation were slightly different, could be a sentence on their own. The next thing in the hierarchy is the sentence. And these are what are used the fewest. So word used the most, then phrase, dependent clause, independent clause, sentence. The sentence is used the least often, simply because everything that is written should end up in a sentence, but each sentence is composed of all these different parts. So there are definitely multiple words in a sentence, there are probably multiple phrases, there may be multiple dependent clauses and one independent clause that all go into making up a single sentence. So in the way that an army should have the most privates and the fewest generals, sentences would have the most words and the fewest sentences. This order, sentence, clauses, phrases, and words, shows how punctuation is derived. Punctuation is guided by sentence level punctuation downward. What I mean by that is that for independent and dependent clauses, phrases, and words, the punctuation that goes around them is driven by the punctuation of the sentence. So to understand how clauses and phrases fit within a sentence, the first thing we're going to do here is take this sentence and run it down to its most basic element. Now, as we've seen here, we said sentence and phrase exist within this sample. And that means that not every sentence is going to have every level of hierarchy. You can use these different levels of hierarchy as you practice and write more to make your writing more interesting and add more detail. But they don't have to exist, and you don't have to use every level of hierarchy every sentence, because if you do, it's going to become really hard to read your writing. It'll just be too complex. One thing about lower level punctuation, so the comma to everything else, the semicolon to the mid-tier and the terminal punctuation, and then that mid-tier to terminal punctuation, is that the lower the level, the lower level punctuation can never do anything to override the meaning of the higher level punctuation in the context of your sentence. And with only a few exceptions, the lower level of punctuation cannot do the job of the higher level punctuation. And as we go through each of the videos talking about the specific punctuation, we'll see the handful of isolated instances of that. But in general, the commas can never do the job of the semicolon. However, semicolons in some isolated instances can do the job of a comma. So what's up above can, in some limited cases, do the job of what's below it. So what this means for you is if you're having trouble punctuating a sentence, you need to follow the hierarchy to see how that guides your sentence creation. And that's very simply sentence, independent clause, dependent clause, phrase, word. Your sentences will use your period, your question mark, or your exclamation point. Your independent clauses will use your semicolon. Your dependent clauses will use your comma. Your phrases will use your comma. And your words, if you need to separate them, will use your comma. So again, you can see as we've talked about this, the comma does the heavy lifting. It does the majority of the work in your sentences. And that's one of the reasons people are so confused by it, and that we're going to be spending so much time discussing all of its uses in depth. One thing I would suggest is that as you go through this series, periodically come back to parts of this video and check on them, because you'll see that what I'm saying here will make more sense as the individual mechanics of the pieces of punctuation that we're going to talk about make more sense. And so just remember to write with care, because as long as you take care of the sentence will take care of you.